Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another edition of the Scruffy Movies podcast. I'm Zach Wallace.
And I'm John Crocker.
And if you are a fan of movies, if you're a fan of big action movies, you know that Godzilla King of the Monsters was just released this weekend, which Crocker and I have seen, and that will be the focus of our podcast today. But we started to think, why don't we open up the conversation to all different kinds of monsters? I know specifically that there's something called the Dark Universe, which you may or may not know about, that Crocker has been wanting to talk about for a while, but I knew that we couldn't commit an entire hour to it. So we just thought, let's throw monsters out with the kitchen sink and let's just talk about every monster that we can think of, just in general monster movies. But it's all going to be kind of focused around Godzilla and the new recently founded MonsterVerse, which includes Godzilla, Kong Skull Island, and now the recently released Godzilla King of the Monsters.
So I guess to kick it off, what did you think of Godzilla?
I enjoyed it. It's hard to make a bad Godzilla movie when you actually have just Godzilla in there fighting a bunch of monsters. I feel like it's hard to make a bad Godzilla movie. But once again, and this is something that has plagued the MonsterVerse from the beginning, the humans just aren't that interesting in these movies. And I don't know if that's a symptom of we'd rather see the monsters fight, or if that's a symptom of people don't know how to balance these giant monsters with the human story. But from the original Godzilla to Kong Skull Island to Godzilla King of the Monsters, literally the bad parts of the movie have always been like the humans. Like, why would they make that decision? Why would they do this? Why would they do that? And it makes you question that kind of thing about it. So I will say Godzilla was awesome. The monster fights were really good, very well choreographed, I guess I should say, animated, however they did that. But the fights were amazing. But as always with these movies, there was just something lacking with the human story. And it just seems like they just have not found a good way to balance that yet.
Yeah, I'll agree with that. And pretty much everything you just said. I mean, as you mentioned, it's hard to make a bad Godzilla movie when the whole focus is him fighting other monsters, which is really what everybody loves about a lot of the old Godzilla movies and a lot of the old Godzilla lore is really when you get these, big battles against one another. And this entire movie was just, ongoing battles really from the beginning to the end. So it was great. I mean, as far as the humans go, I don't know. I think that could plague this one particular franchise more than others because these monsters are all like larger than life. Like you can't have an emotional moment really with Godzilla. I mean, they did great actually show like giving the monsters some character. The giant three-headed monster, God, I can't remember the name off the top of my head.
Ghidorah.
Yeah, Ghidorah. They would, like bite at each other and sort of like push each other around like a three-headed monster probably would if you were attached at the same body for your whole life. So that was kind of cool. But I think with a lot of other monster movies with more like the Dark Universe style monsters that you could really get into the human side of things. But with monsters that are just gigantic and you can't really communicate with, and we're still not even sure of their motives and everything else, I mean, part of that is just that the humans might kind of suck.
Yeah, and I honestly think that probably part of the problem is when they go to break the story, when they're trying to like figure out what to do, they probably always start from the human side and then involve Godzilla. But it's a movie called Godzilla. So why not figure out what Godzilla's story is first and then see how the humans fit around that? I think they always try to do the human thing first because that's what people are going to relate to. They're going to relate to the humans being in it and going through their storylines and stuff because the audience needs, which is why I don't think that they can remove the human element entirely, because the audience needs somebody to look at and say, okay, that's my person for this movie. Like they are reacting the way I would react. And it gives more of the like you're in the movie feeling because you can relate to the characters or a character. So I don't think it can be eliminated completely, but I think the mistake they're making is trying to do it all at once or doing one over the other first, which the main focus should be on Godzilla, which is why I think I like all of the old Friday the 13th, Nightmare on Elm Street, all the old Halloween movies so much, because they basically looked at it from the point of view of like, okay, Michael Myers is the main character. We know he ended up here last time. Let's write a movie based around what happens to Michael this time, and then we'll like make a movie around Michael, which follows the other characters. But Michael's the only character that's in all of the Halloween movies besides Halloween 3. He's the mainstay. And so that's what it is in this movie. Godzilla is the mainstay. So they're putting too much emphasis on the humans, which we need, but too much emphasis is being drawn to them and away from the monsters that we came to see.
Yeah, something I thought was interesting is going into this, we had talked about all the reviews sort of saying that it was just a bunch of monsters fighting. And when we got there, I actually wanted to see more monsters fighting. I mean, I think we got plenty, don't get me wrong, but if they ever made a Godzilla movie that was like some strange mashup of like Cloverfield and Blair Witch or something where you're just watching like Godzilla wreck the town through security cameras, like I would be okay with that. I would be okay with the complete lack of human presence. But I think that ultimately a lot of the Godzilla story is the story of, what's happening to the humans around Godzilla being there and doing things. So I agree that you can't totally get rid of the human presence. And I don't know, I thought that with them having old girl 11 in this one, that they really, really could have focused on the humans like a ton. And they gave Godzilla his due and everyone else. So I think that it was probably more well balanced in my mind than a lot of people are giving it credit for. Or at least they didn't abuse it to the level that they easily could have. Maybe a better statement.
Yeah, and I actually liked the characters in this, and it could have something to do with my liking of the actors. Like I liked O'Shea Jackson Jr.'s character, Ice Cube's son's soldier character, but he was in roughly 5 minutes total, maybe. But I just like O'Shea Jackson Jr. So when he popped up, I was like, oh, cool, O'Shea Jackson Jr. And like it just made me like him because I like the actor, even though he didn't really have a character arc or a plot or anything. Same kind of with Thomas Middleditch's character. I just like Thomas Middleditch. So when he shows up as like the chief engineer of technology, whatever he was for Monarch, I was like, oh, cool. I like that guy. And so he's in for maybe like 10 minutes total, but I was like, yeah, I like that guy. So I think they did their casting really well. And if they would have, it's weird because we're kind of contradicting ourselves because we're saying, or at least I'm contradicting myself because I'm saying I want Godzilla to be the focus, but we still need good human characters. So like we need to care for them. And they've gone long as compared to the first movie. I feel like they've completed long strides in this one because I actually cared about the people, and who they cast had a lot to do with that. Now, if they would just like give the characters, I don't know, like eliminate all of these background characters. Like there's a million people that we don't need. And I actually talked about this before we saw the movie. I really love, my favorite Transformers movie is Bumblebee because it had basically as the stars a Transformer and Haley Steinfeld, just one girl. And now there were other people in the movie, but they were just supporting the story between Haley Steinfeld and the Transformer. And so that's what we need to do. Let's eliminate everybody else. Let's make Millie Bobby Brown the main person, and she has some kind of like connection with Godzilla, and everybody else is just there supporting their story, and then really beef up her character, give her a lot to do. And that's great because now you have a human character. You have everybody supporting that human character, but it's still a Godzilla movie.
Yeah, I'm totally down with that. I mean, I like a lot of the backstory though too. Like, if they really were to blow this universe like out of the water, I would want to see like a movie dedicated to Monarch and like the story of Monarch and all of that. Like, I want to actually see a lot of the background of what's going on in this world and you can't always have Godzilla or some other huge monsters present if that's what you're going to do, because they're not just trampling all over the earth at all times always. So I don't know. I see where you're coming from. I think that's a good idea, and I think Transformers proves that you can have a giant non-human creature and a human and tell both stories and it be well done. I mean, Transformers has proved that over and over again.
Well, they proved it twice, I would say.
they've had at least 3 decent movies.
The first movie and the Bumblebee were really good.
The second one wasn't too bad, was it?
In retrospect, you should watch it again. It blew my mind when it came out, and then I watched it more recently, and I was like, okay. It's one of those, and that kind of opens the floor to other monster movies, or just in general, like these big budget blockbusters, which is what Godzilla King of the Monsters is. Sometimes it's fun to just click your brain off and watch things go boom for a while. And that is, and in that respect, Godzilla accomplished exactly what it set out to do.
Yeah, I mean, we say this on this podcast quite often, but if you want like a tear-jerking, heart-wrenching movie for it to be a good movie in your eyes, then that will not align with what we see as good movies. Because for us, as long as it just entertains you and keeps you satisfied and is, worth what it's worth, then it's done its job. At least for me, it's that way. And this movie was definitely entertaining. It was definitely one of the better Godzilla movies I'd ever seen. I mean, I didn't think the last Godzilla was that bad. It sort of stood out to me as probably being the best I'd ever seen until this one came out. So, I mean, it's up there,
I agree. And I'm having trouble. I actually was debating with myself before we got in here. What do I like? But like, how would I rank the MonsterVerse in terms of all 3 of these if I could? And I'm torn between whether I like the first Godzilla more or this Godzilla more. And it's only for one reason. And it's the fact that I actually really like the characterization and like the storylines of there's something going wrong, but we don't know what it is yet. Like, I like them tracing Godzilla in the first movie, tracking him with like seismic activity, but they don't know what it is. There's people just like, it's the biggest seismic earthquake we've ever seen. And they're like, are we sure we want to catch this thing? Like and you just see like giant footprints and stuff. I love that for some reason because it creates an aura of mystery around this character. And even in the first movie, they didn't know if Godzilla was good or bad. And it's like they set all that up. And I really like that. And also, there was less of a focus on other monsters and a main focus on Godzilla. So we got to know Godzilla a lot in that first movie, I feel like. And then where this one was like, okay, they know Godzilla. Now let's pit him against a bunch of monsters, which is still really cool. It was really cool to see. But just getting that kind of like to know Godzilla and having that mystery feel to it, I liked it a lot.
Yeah, it was kind of a Jurassic Parky feel where it's like, should we be doing this, kind of thing. So I'm totally with you there. I have not seen Kong, so I can't rank them. But I'll tell you one thing, for it, like when they were making this movie and writing this script, they must have been just so paranoid that the world would not realize that they're all in the same universe with one another, because they mentioned Kong and Skull Island like so many times, and they tried to be just so sly about it, but it came over as being so obvious to me.
Yeah, well, that's funny because that's also a kind of a conundrum like we were just talking about, because they've linked all the movies together technically with Monarch and using that company as the chain between these movies. Monarch is always present when these giant monsters are around. And so I thought that was subtle enough. That gave me enough clues. But for people who maybe hadn't seen Kong Skull Island, they were like, okay, we have to drop as many hints as possible. But honestly, every time they said something about Kong in this movie, my heart fluttered a little bit because I am so excited for Godzilla versus Kong next year. So like every time they would drop a little hint, I'd be like, oh, good. God, they're talking about King Kong again.
Well, you got a lot of those because they dropped a lot of hints.
Oh, they certainly did. Yeah, I back to back to back to back to back to back to back. Oh, by the way, this is a spoiler podcast for anybody.
Yeah, if people listening to this don't know that by now,
I'll put it in the title so they know because we definitely did not say it in the beginning of the of the start. We just started spoiling stuff.
that's pretty much what we do here. Is just the spoiler cast.
Yeah, there's no non-spoilers reviews.
Yeah, for real. We don't even. Yeah, we don't even warn it anymore. We just go right into it.
Yeah. Well, talking about Godzilla versus Kong, I am curious because I have a very clear answer in my head. It was kind of the same like when I watched Freddy versus Jason. I like both characters, but I know who I want to win the fight. Who do you want to see win in the Godzilla versus Kong movie?
Oh, definitely Godzilla.
I'm definitely Kong.
Really?
Yeah.
No
Kong's
way.
my boy. I've loved King Kong way more than Godzilla ever since I was little, especially the 2005, I believe, Peter Jackson version with Jack Black and Naomi Watts and Adrian Brody. I loved that movie. I played the video game, and I specifically love Skull Island because for some reason I really like storylines where it's uncharted Earth because basically that opens it up to you can do whatever you want and we'll buy into it. Like Jack Black's running away from velociraptors amidst a bunch of brachiosauruses that are also running away from the velociraptors. Great. Sounds good. let's see it. Let's do it. And so just like seeing the exploration of Skull Island and stuff, it's always endeared myself more to King Kong than Godzilla. And so I'm definitely going Kong.
I mean, I like Kong, but Godzilla is definitely the king, the one to rule them all. Now, of course, I haven't seen what they make Kong out to be in this universe that he might be, and we've talked about this a little bit off air, but he might be a bit more of a badass than he was in the past. But I mean, I really don't think he stands a chance against Godzilla, especially after seeing what Godzilla was just able to do. And I don't know, I think that in Kong versus Godzilla, it'll probably end up being, hopefully at least, like they'll throw bows, but then have to work together to beat a bigger evil. It's kind of what I'm thinking it's going to be.
Oh, for sure. That's exactly what it's going to be because it's already setting up for people to be like, hey, wait, because they're both good guys. And unlike movies like Captain America Civil War, where you can sit Iron Man and Captain America down in a room and have them explain to each other why they think they're wrong, and then that leads to a fight, Godzilla and King Kong don't speak. So when they see each other and just start fighting, people are going to be like, wait. Godzilla's good in his movies, and Kong was definitely good in his movie. Why are they fighting? So there's going to have to be some backstory there, and then eventually I think, yes, they're going to team up to take on something much bigger than the both of them because they are set up to both be good guys.
Yeah, I definitely need to go back and catch up on Kong. I mean, is Kong just the basic King Kong storyline?
No, they've updated it. It takes place during the Vietnam War now, and it's actually a monarch expedition. It's somebody played by John Goodman who discovers Skull Island, and he talks the senator into giving him funding and a military escort to go to Skull Island to investigate, and then that's when they start seeing all the monsters and everything. And it's actually got a lot of really good actors in it, a lot like King of the Monsters. It's you get endeared a lot to the actors, not necessarily the characters themselves, but like, yeah, John Goodman's in it, Samuel L. Jackson's in it, Brie Larson, Tom Hiddleston. They basically looked at the MCU and they were like, yeah, these couple, and just brought them over into Kong Skull Island. And actually, which I did not know, but I was curious, I don't know if you remember the whenever Mothra was hatching, the scientist with the glasses that had run outside and was like watching Mothra hatch at that Monarch thing in King of the Monsters, you know?
Yeah.
That is an older version of a character from Skull Island. Because I saw that guy and I was like, oh, I recognize that guy. And then he ended up not doing much. And I was like, that's strange. He's a pretty big actor. I wonder why they would just give him that background role. And then I looked into it, and he's playing an older version of a character from Skull Island.
Gotcha. That makes sense. So Skull Island then is way in the past.
Vietnam War, like the war just ended in Vietnam, and the soldiers are being shipped home, but for this one squadron, instead of going home, they get commandeered basically to go to Skull Island instead.
Gotcha.
So yeah, there's lots of awesome like 70s music and stuff like that. It's a good movie with the same issues that Godzilla and King of the Monsters have, which is just not as interesting human characters. You're way more interested in the monsters and stuff. Although John C. Reilly is in the movie, and he does amazing. His character is very, very good in that movie.
Does Kong kidnap a girl and climb to the top of a skyscraper?
No, he doesn't even get to America at all.
Okay.
Which is curious because now, well, it also said something at the end of King of the Monsters where like something's going on at Skull Island. It's drawing all the monsters to Skull Island. So it seems like Godzilla versus Kong might take place on Skull Island, which if so, yes, because that means not only will like all the monsters that were introduced in King of the Monsters probably be there, but like a million other monsters could pop up on Skull Island, and I'm down with that.
Yeah, and then that in itself could breed loads of other films in the future.
Yeah. And I did see something really cool that it's honestly the thing that's gotten me most excited about the Godzilla versus Kong fight. A producer for Kong Skull Island, probably for the entire MonsterVerse as it stands, somebody was like, "So I noticed that you only call him Kong in this movie. Why are you not calling him King Kong?" And the guy's like, "Well, he's not king yet."
Yeah.
He's like, "Godzilla's king," and it's like, "Oh, okay, so that's what it's gonna be like." A championship belt being able to say King Kong.
Yeah, now that would make me think that they're setting Kong up to win so that they could then have a movie called King Kong.
Yeah, maybe so. I think it's gonna end up being that they take on something else, and Godzilla like cedes his title to King Kong or something because he's a better fighter, whatever it ends up being. He's a better protector than Godzilla, and Godzilla's gonna walk off with Mothra, and Godzilla's gonna go back in time to put back the Infinity Stones, and then King Kong's gonna look over, and Godzilla's gonna be an old man in a windbreaker on a bench, and he's gonna walk over, and he's gone back in time and lived his life with Mothra back in the past.
Just the way we called it.
Yeah, exactly how we called it, and he's gonna be like, "Hey, you'll be a better king than I ever was," and he's gonna hand him his shield.
His shield. That's exactly how it's going to go down.
Oh no, 100%.
Yeah. Mark this date. You heard it here first.
You heard it. When the guys who are making Godzilla versus Kong saw Endgame, they were like, "They ripped us off." That was like shot for shot what we were doing.
You know, if they said that there has to be a King Kong in the works. Has to.
Yeah, and that's just what got me so excited, because it was just such a short answer where like clearly this was a decision that they talked about, and they were like, "Well, he's not king yet." And you can even see now the King of the Monsters ended with Godzilla being bowed down to by all of the rest of the Titans. So Godzilla is king right now. Godzilla is king of the monsters. And so now we're getting Godzilla versus Kong, and that's going to end in like a championship bout for the title of king. Who is the alpha?
I hope it's Godzilla. But I hope we also get a King Kong movie.
Well, see, I think it's going to end up being that they fight something else, and then they realize they're friends, but Godzilla's like, "Oh, you're a better alpha than me." And so at the end, he like bows to Kong or something like that. And so all the rest of them bow to Kong.
Maybe.
In every Versus movie, nobody ever comes out on top of the other. I feel like there's always like they get their punches in and they get their punches in. Like Iron Man 1, say what?
Maybe not in big monster movies like this, dude. They could kill off monsters completely and totally.
I just don't think they're going to kill off Godzilla or King Kong because that right now, those are the only two in the MonsterVerse. And the MonsterVerse is set up to expand because they didn't call it like the Godzilla Kong verse. So I don't know what other monsters they're going to put in it potentially, but I don't think that either of those will die.
Yeah. God, what other monsters are even in the MonsterVerse that are not like a spin-off of really Godzilla?
Yeah, see, that's what I don't know. They haven't given us any yet. It's Godzilla or King Kong are the two. So there could be more potentially. Uh, and I talked about this in our Pacific Rim podcast, but Legendary owns all three rights to Godzilla, King Kong, and Pacific Rim. And the Pacific Rim franchise is literally all about giant robots fighting giant monsters. So let's do that. Set that up.
Yeah, for real. I want that crossover. That is the crossover to end all crossovers.
Yeah.
I want to see like Godzilla being backed up by the giant robots. I forget what they're called.
Jaegers,
Jaegers.
which is also not too far outside the realm of possibility with one line in this movie, which made me really curious. I don't know if it piqued your attention as much as it piqued mine. Whenever Godzilla defeats Ghidorah in this movie, somebody's like, wow, I'm glad he's on our side. And somebody else says, for now. Like,
Yeah,
who's
that's
to
true too.
know? Godzilla is just trying to balance the planet. Who's to know when the humans become the issue of balancing the planet? Godzilla is not good or bad. We're just on his side for now because he's on our side trying to defeat these monsters. We're
Yeah,
not like, there's no alliance. There's no like handshake agreement to not hurt each other.
speaking of not hurting the planet, that was one of like the weakest things in the entire movie is when Eleven's mom is like, she got busted red-handed, like letting one of the big baddies out or whatever, and was working with the bad guys. And her justification was that humans are actually the bad ones, and we deserve to be, extinct or whatever, or holocausted, however you want to say it, genocide. So, but it was just done like terribly. Like I feel like you could, if that was the case you wanted to make in a Godzilla movie, you could totally make that case. But that like 2 minute explanation they gave her, where she was just yelling at the camera that like we're all the bad guys, was
Yeah,
terrible.
everybody sucks except for the monsters.
It was horrible. That was like that scene was like cringeworthy to me.
I didn't cringe from it, but it's definitely going back to the issue of the humans in these monster movies because they were like, okay, we need to explain why all these monsters are being let out because we've already set up that they've been dormant for this whole time because otherwise people would have been freaking out way before Godzilla showed up in 2014. And the explanation that they gave was definitely just like plot driven. Like for her to just be able to call it at the exact time when they start to question her motives and for her to just explain the entire plan. I also kind of laughed when that scene was over because the guy was like, we have to move forward. This is your plan, especially now since you've explained it to all of them.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, they did a good job of sort of poking at themselves a little bit, doing things like that. They definitely didn't take themselves too seriously in this movie, which is I always like to see. I mean, it was a serious movie, but it had little nods like that in it.
yeah, I always like those little nods. I like people acknowledging what's come before in their own way of being like, we understand the tropes of this movie. It's why Scream is my favorite horror movie of all time because it like there's literally a scene of a guy telling you the rules to survive a horror movie. And then people break the rules and they die in that movie. And then they build them up back again, the rules again. And so it's one of my favorite things of people knowing that they're in a movie like this and being able to kind of make fun of the fact but still have to deal with being in this movie.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. That's a good way to put it. And Scream is probably the guiding light of of sort of movies that do that.
Oh yeah, for sure. That entire franchise is literally about making fun of horror movie stereotypes while living out a horror movie stereotype.
Oh, what's that sound mean?
That's what means it's halftime. Whoop. So halftime is the part of our show. If you've never listened before, where Crocker and I take a break from the conversation we're having. We talk about recent movies we've seen, movie news, things coming out that we're excited about. It's also been the part of the show where we've been giving away our free digital copies. We're going to continue that this week, and we're actually going to be giving away the entire Ghostbusters franchise, all 3 movies in one digital copy giveaway. So if you enter the code word Slimer below on the YouTube video you're watching right now, or direct message me at Scruffy Movies on Instagram, again, the code word is Slimer, you'll be entered to win free digital copies of Ghostbusters, Ghostbusters 2, and the most recent Ghostbusters remake.
So, halftime.
So halftime.
What you got?
For anybody who's a DC fan, Swamp Thing just started. I just watched the first episode of that, and I gotta say it set up a very good atmosphere. I'm very interested in the story overall, but the episode itself wasn't extremely enticing, and I know that it was just an intro episode, so that's probably why. So I'm gonna continue to watch the series, but it didn't hook me as soon as I turned it on like the previous DC Universe show Doom Patrol did. So we'll see. Which also, Doom Patrol kind of had their setup in Titans before that. So they kind of had a leg up already. But we'll see how it develops. I'm very interested in it. It's shot beautifully. It looks really good. But the first episode wasn't as hooking as I wanted it to be. And then finally, we got a trailer for Rambo: Last Blood, playing Old Town Road as the theme song.
Yeah, you stole mine. That was going to be my halftime.
I've always been more interested in Rocky, but I do love the Rambo movies, so I am interested to see what this one is. Although, and I'll see if you agree in your halftime, as I was watching the trailer, I didn't feel like I was watching Rambo. I felt like I was just watching any other Sylvester Stallone movie. Rambo is characterized by his long hair and bandana, and he didn't have either of those. It was just Sylvester Stallone walking around a farm. So we'll see how that pans out, but it just seemed like I was watching a trailer for just a generic Sylvester Stallone action movie that just happened to be Rambo. So I don't know your feelings on all that, but we also got a trailer for a movie that looks really good called Onward from Disney and Pixar, and that is starring Chris Pratt and Tom Holland, and they play elf brothers who live in a world basically where magic has existed for so long that they've just become a regular society and they live just with magic. And so like there's unicorns flying around, there's unicorns like digging in the trash. They're almost like the raccoons of this society. And they have to go on some kind of quest together across this suburbia, but it has magic stuff all around it, all in it, all the time. And that looks really good. I'm very interested in that.
Is that animated?
Yes.
Gotcha.
And then finally, which I know you probably are freaking out about, Galaxy's Edge finally opened in Disneyland.
Oh yeah.
So it's still, I think like the end of summer is when it's opening at Disney World, but that's super awesome that it's open in Disneyland, because now that means searching on YouTube and stuff, you'll probably be able to find like some, like what the rides are like, people on the rides, people going through the shops, like all kinds of awesome stuff. So I have yet to start my YouTube binge of that, because I know that when I get started, it's going to take me a while to get through everything I want to get through. But very excited that that is open, because that is super cool.
Yeah, that has definitely already started. A few of the main like Disney YouTubers that I follow have already done like walk-arounds. They've already gotten like drone footage. I mean, it's crazy what they'll do on opening weekend.
Yeah, that's halftime for me this week. Oh,
awesome. Well,
actually, I forgot this already. At the end of my halftime, I've been trying to review a couple summer blockbusters, things that I've seen. And I recently saw, we're reviewing it right now, Godzilla King of the Monsters. But I also saw Aladdin, which I didn't get to talk about in the last podcast. And I loved Aladdin. I thought it was extremely good. but I am just I just love Disney so much. I can't like I couldn't think of a good word, but I'm a Disney file. I love Disney, so anything Disney, I'm probably more prepared to love than things that come from other studios. But I really love the new live action Aladdin. It was super good. And then hopefully next week I will have a review for X-Men Dark Phoenix, which I'm not entirely looking forward to, but I'm going in with an open mind, so we'll see what they're able to give us.
Was Aladdin like, did they follow the original script pretty tightly, or did they really kind of do their own thing with it?
No, in general was the same story. They changed a couple things, but a lot of it was the same story, and they had a lot of the same songs and stuff, which were really good. And I mean, like I can't state this enough. Will Smith freaking killed it as the genie. He killed it.
Good to hear.
Yeah, but I would highly suggest that if you like the old Aladdin or are a fan of Disney movies or Disney live action movies, it was very good.
Aladdin is definitely not one that I'll rush out and go see. Like I would for Jungle Book, I would for um oh goodness, Jungle Book and Lion King. I would for either one of those, but not so much for Aladdin. I don't know. It was just never my favorite.
It was never my favorite either, but like I said, if it's Disney, I gotta go. I love Disney.
Yeah, yeah, I'll definitely catch it. As far as Rambo goes, getting back to that, because that's really the only big thing I had on my list for today's halftime. I see what you're saying with the bandana and the hair. I definitely feel, especially with them playing Old Town Road, so terrible in the trailer. I feel like it was just a stereotypical run of the mill Sylvester Stallone action movie.
Yeah.
But at the same time, he did have his bow and he did have his knife. And we got to see the bow and we got to see the knife. So those are just as iconic, I would say, as the haircut and the bandana. So it wasn't totally, to me, his looks didn't make it look out of place as much as just the trailer kind of made it look just kind of like a generic action movie.
Yeah, I can agree with that. It just he's just characterized to me in literally every movie before, all four movies before this. He's running around a jungle with long hair and a bandana. And so as soon as it started and he had short hair and no bandana, I was like, wait.
Well, he's old too, so they could use that.
He was old in
In the
Rambo
first 5
4.
minutes, somebody might say, "You finally cut your hair off" or something.
He was old in Rambo 4. He was still rocking a long hair and a bandana.
Yeah, maybe they'll have the moment where he actually puts the bandana on, like looking in the mirror, and
I'm
then
sure
maybe
he will.
maybe somebody will make a comment about him having short hair. I don't know. I would say, Guy, you brought up a great point too with like Rocky versus Rambo. I know this is an unpopular opinion, but I probably liked the Rambo movies more growing up than I did the Rockies.
It's funny because the reason I like Rocky more than Rambo is because the Rambo movies were all the same, but literally the Rocky movies were all the same too.
Yes, they were.
Just with more of a focus on, I guess, the people he was fighting instead of the Rambo. So I guess that makes the difference for me. But yeah, Rocky's always been more of I've always been more of a fan of Rocky than Rambo.
Yep. Yeah, I would have to go Rambo over Rocky just because I like the guns and the dirt bikes and all that, and the explosions.
Yeah.
You don't get that in Rocky.
No, you get heartwarming sports action.
Yeah, heartwarming. There you go.
It is heartwarming. You tear up when Rocky does that. Hey, and Creed, when Creed gets back up and they start playing the Rocky song, and you think he's down for the count, you just start crying.
I'm not disagreeing. That's a good word for it because it really is. And that was like, there was a genre of that, and especially in like the 80s, where like these hardcore, like tear-jerking, heartwarming, also action movies. Like there was sort of a bit of a plethora of those coming all out at the same time.
Oh yeah, for sure. And Sylvester Stallone was the king of it. So we'll see. Seems like this one's going to be an emotional story. Definitely seems like it's tied to First Blood, which doesn't seem likely because First Blood was Rambo fighting a bunch of cops.
Cops.
So
Yeah.
unless cops are coming back to fight Rambo in Last Blood, but it looked like white mercenaries to me. It look of the people that we saw, it looked like white guys. So it didn't look like any nationalities that Rambo has fought before, which it could be somebody else. Like the Brazilians have come back to get him. So I don't know, but I don't. It definitely seems like it's tied to the first one, but I don't know if they were doing that just for marketing purposes or if it's actually tied to the first one, like in the movie itself.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't look at like Rambo's always been they've always been able to just sort of start anew with a new movie and be like, these are the bad guys, this is why, and go fight. Like there is sort of a overarching story, but not really. Definitely not like Rocky,
Yeah.
So I think they could really throw anything out there and it just be like, we would just be like, oh, okay, these are the bad guys now. And we don't really ask why, just because they are.
Yeah, I mean, even if they were like, this is why Rambo was discharged from the military in the first place, was like what he did to these people, then it's like, okay, got it. But that would literally be one scene of them just saying, oh yeah, this is why, this and that, and this and that. And I'd be like, oh, okay, got it. Let's go.
I almost bought a Rambo bow one time, like an actual, like the same bow he used in Rambo.
Should have done it.
I know. I should have. It looked cool hanging on my wall. All right. Does that wrap up halftime?
I think that wraps up halftime.
Okay. So let's kick it over here a little bit in these last few minutes and talk about the Universal monsters.
Yes, so that would be like Frankenstein, the Wolfman, the Invisible Man, Dracula, Creature from the Black Lagoon, like all of the classic monsters that we know.
Mummy, Phantom of the Opera, Hunchback of Notre Dame.
Yes.
Yeah. So this franchise has the most potential of all of the franchises, in my opinion. Like, it is just chock full of potential because there's so many awesome stories, there's so many classic movies, and like we grew up living with everything that these movies influenced. Like all of our cartoons, like all of our Saturday morning cartoons would like reference a Dracula or a Mummy or an Invisible Man or a Wolf Man of some sort. Like how many Phantom of the Opera spinoffs? I mean, there's a DCOM movie that's basically Phantom of the Opera that has Mickey Rooney in it.
Yeah, Phantom of the Megaplex.
That? I mean, Hunchback of Notre Dame kind of got absorbed by Disney a little bit, but I mean, seriously, like there's such good history. There's really old history. There's history that it was part of the, gestalt when we were growing up big time. And now that's been kind of lackluster. Like you don't really see a lot of these characters anymore. But you still know who they are because we were still so influenced by what they influenced. So I think that if they're going to do it, now's the right time. All the monsters are freaking awesome. I mean, even the Van Helsing movie that came out like mid-2000s, I liked. And I mean, that definitely was not a Dark Universe film. But I like anything and everything you give me when it comes to basically any of these characters.
Yeah, first up, I freaking loved that Van Helsing movie when I was a kid. I had like a million Van Helsing toys. I loved the way Frankenstein looked in that movie. He was sweet.
Yep.
But yeah, especially Frankenstein for me. Well, technically Frankenstein's monster, but as he was marketed later, Frankenstein has always been he's always been my favorite. Like I always loved Frankenstein. I dressed up as Frankenstein like 3 years in a row for Halloween. I bought, as soon as I saw that it was available to purchase, Alvin and the Chipmunks Meet Frankenstein, where I got like this cool little flashlight in my VHS from it. Yeah, so I definitely think that the universe is ripe for the picking, and it makes total sense why they would start making all these movies now. I just think if they hadn't kicked it off with the most recent Mummy movie with Tom Cruise, where it was just an absolute stinker.
Well, it was Dracula. Dracula Untold was supposed to be the first one in a new universe, and then it flopped, and they were like, "Oh no, we're totally just kidding. Look, we have a new logo with a new movie, The Mummy, coming out, and this is going to be an all new thing." And then it flopped. So they've tried twice.
Yeah, the what I heard was Dracula Untold was basically finished, and then this idea of the Dark Universe started spinning up, and people were like, "Oh wow, Dark Universe, yeah." So they went back and reshot like 2 or 3 scenes for Dracula Untold, and they're like, "Okay, if this does good, this will be the start of the Dark Universe." And then it didn't do good, and so they were like, "Just kidding, that was never part of the Dark Universe. Got you guys." And so they made The Mummy, and they're like, "This is the start of the Dark Universe." And then that came out and did terribly, and they're like, "Okay, all right then."
Now, I've heard tell that they're still moving forward with a lot of these movies, and I know like on their Wikipedia page, The Invisible Man has a release date of March in 2020, but I've also heard like relatively recently that all of the Dark Universe has basically been put on hold, even though they've already like locked down Angelina Jolie and Johnny Depp and like a bunch of people to play these characters.
Yeah, the only one I know of that like is legitimately moving forward, like I see updates about it, is The Invisible Man. And I think it's still very early in the pre-production phase, because basically the updates I see are like, "Oh hey, this person is attached to Invisible Man now. They're gonna be in it." So I assume that The Invisible Man is still moving forward at the very least, and then maybe if that one does good, they'll be like, "Oh yeah, that Mummy movie totally got you guys. That was not even the start of it at all."
Maybe, or who knows.
Doing that. But I was really pumped up when I first heard about it, because they announced basically like how Marvel will announce just entire phases at once to get you super excited for all these movies coming out. They were like, "Yeah, The Mummy, The Invisible Man, Creature from the Black Lagoon, Bride of Frankenstein, and then a crossover Van Helsing movie where Van Helsing will be hunting all of the monsters, so they have to assemble to like protect each other from Van Helsing." I was like, "Yes, that sounds amazing." And then The Mummy came out and just shot that dream right in the foot.
Yeah. Yeah, Johnny Depp's supposed to be the Invisible Man. Russell Crowe's supposed to be Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde.
Yeah.
I mean, it's setting up to be awesome. I think at least last I saw, Angelina Jolie was Bride of Frankenstein.
Yes, I think that's who it was. And Russell Crowe was in The Mummy, and I think that is what kind of drew it back a little bit. It was a movie at war with itself. They didn't know if they wanted to make it an action movie or a horror movie or like a science fiction movie. So it constantly kept changing tones. And then they spent too much time, like they went into it going, "This movie's going to start a universe, and we need to explain the universe so that people can buy into it for the next movies," which Iron Man did very well not doing. They basically just introduced S.H.I.E.L.D., and that was what connected the movies for a while, was Nick Fury or Agent Coulson. This movie literally spends probably 30 or 45 minutes at Russell Crowe's installation, which I forget the name of the installation, but it's basically the monarch of the Dark Universe. And they spend 45 minutes talking about it. And I just got so bored that in the theater, I fell asleep and woke up like when the action started again.
Dude, I've heard so many people in my life say that they've fallen asleep in a movie, and I've never, ever in my entire life fallen asleep in a movie theater. I don't think.
There's been a few times where I've seen movies like really late and they weren't as good as I wanted them to be, or like maybe I've already seen them before, so I'll just start going to sleep. But then there's some movies like The Mummy. It was like at noon on a Saturday, and it literally bored me that much that my brain was like, "I can't watch this anymore. Just go to sleep."
Yeah, it was pretty terrible.
Did you watch it?
No.
I gave you the DVD to watch it. You need to watch it because
I own it. I've heard nothing but terrible things. So when I say, "Hey, I have a couple hours to watch a movie," It's just not
usually what they
exactly
want.
top on the list.
But yeah, I mean, I really want them to get this universe up and working. It's so funny because so far it seems like the only universe that has actually worked has been the MCU.
And I think that it's taken DC a while, but they're getting their acting gear.
Yeah,
And
they're finding their footing.
and it's different too, you know. I mean, it's like this whole consecutive universe thing, because we've seen lots. I mean, Star Wars is all connected. James Bond, you know, is just kind of like they're not really necessarily connected. They're connected in bits, you know. They're connected in like stints. So you get a lot of movies. I mean, there's been lots of movies throughout the years that have been connected, but like, and then to build an entire universe up is a heck of an undertaking. And it's taken DC, who's probably second best at it, this long to even really start showing us that they know what they're doing. So, yeah, I mean, it's not surprising that it fails, but with it being so star studded, like it's just had to, I don't know if that's a producer or a director or what, or a writer that can fail a movie like The Mummy. Or maybe it was people like me that saw that and had no idea that it wasn't like a Scorpion King sort of movie, you know? Like I thought that it was going to be a continuation of those.
Yeah. No, it is 100% a reboot.
With what's his name? Brendan Fraser.
Yeah, Brendan Fraser.
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 Fraser. Whatever.
I think the rest of this podcast is going to be us saying his last name.
Brendan Fraser.
Well, I mean, do you have anything else on Godzilla or the Dooku, the Dark Universe Cinematic Universe?
No, but it's awesome if they call it the Dooku.
I think they're just calling it the Dark Universe. That was a joke I saw made by people I like to watch on YouTube called Funhouse. They were making fun of that fact, and they were calling it the Dooku, the Dark Universe Cinematic Universe.
Well, Godzilla's great. It's definitely awesome. I hope the Monsterverse does very well, and I hope they continue building upon it. The Dark Universe is just ripe for the picking. I hope they get their acting gear because, man, like with, I mean, just the history. I mean, they made 60 movies or 100 movies in the past, like with these characters. If they just started remaking some of those with stories they know works, you know, with good actors and actresses, it's got to do okay.
Yeah, and I mean, and even in those franchises, there were crossovers. There was Frankenstein meets the Wolfman, and then Abbott and Costello meet Frankenstein. Abbott and Costello meet the Wolfman. Like, there were still crossovers in that franchise. They just didn't build it up as a universe. So it can be done, and it was done with these characters already. Like, they just need to get their act together. Everybody's so excited to get their wheels up and running that they don't actually take time to think about what they're doing before they start doing it. They just shove everything together and hope people will like it.
Yep. I mean, let us not forget that Iron Man 1 was like one of the biggest movies of all time when it came out.
Yeah, and it was literally just S.H.I.E.L.D. was in it, and then at the end, they said the words Avengers. Other than that, it was a movie about Iron Man.
Yeah, the Avenger Initiative.
Yeah, it wasn't trying to set up a universe. It was just a movie about Iron Man. And if everybody needs to go into their movies thinking like that, make it a movie, and then figure out tiny ways to connect it overall.
Yep. Awesome. Well, closing thoughts from you?
Godzilla was really good. Human characters weren't as good. I believe it's probably still on par with the 2014 Godzilla, which I liked a lot. So I think that this one was better in some aspects, but worse in others. So I will give it. They came out with a movie of extremely similar quality, which is not a bad thing to me because I like that movie a lot. I'm very excited for the Dooku if they can ever actually get it up and going. I'm excited to see. I'm a huge fan of horror movies, and to see like an actual horror movie shared universe would be awesome. Although it seems like they're trying to set it more up as like action movies. So, and I mean, really, that would be cool too. They just need to choose a tone and go for it. So I guess we'll see what happens with that. But yeah, go check out Godzilla. And thank you for listening to this episode of the Scruffy Movies podcast. Please enter to win the free digital copies of Ghostbusters, Ghostbusters 2, and the most recent Ghostbusters movie. Just enter the code word Slimer below or direct message me at Scruffy Movies on Instagram. Please follow us on Instagram at Scruffy Movies.
And Crocalicious.
Thank you all for listening, and we will see you next week.
Bye.